All right. Hi, and welcome everybody. We're here with our fan meetups brought to you by Fan Expo and the Fan Ambassadors program. I'm your fan ambassador, uh, Jeremy Johnston, and I have a co-host today.
And I'm Angelo Corsino, and I'm an administrator with Unite the Factions.
And we're here to talk to you about Dungeons and Dragons and specifically organized play, what it is, how to get involved, what are the advantages, and how you can engage in this community and take from it what you will. I'd just like to remind everyone that this is a family-friendly event. So just if you can keep that in mind when asking questions or anything like that, that'd be appreciated. So, just before we get started, of course, Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game. It can be played with your friends, or it can be played with strangers, in person or online. It can be played in video games like Neverwinter Nights or Dark Alliance
Or the new Baldur's Gate 3.
or the new Baldur's Gate 3. So it's possible that you've played Dungeons and Dragons without even knowing so.
I did that about 20 years ago. Didn't know I was playing anything to do with Dungeons and Dragons, and found out about 3 years ago when I started playing D&D.
Yeah. And all through the 45 years or so that Dungeons and Dragons has been around, there's been a community that's been surrounding it. A lot of these people used to meet together in large convention settings, not unlike Fan Expo, and they started to develop an organized program to run adventures, write adventures for, and develop a brand new format of Dungeons and Dragons that people could share together. Uh, so there have been many different organized play campaigns over the years, including Living Greyhawk and Living Forgotten Realms. But in fifth edition, they call this program Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League, or just Adventures League, or even AL for
Yeah.
short.
Ddal. It's the one that I use a lot.
Yeah, it it's a program that started pretty much right as soon as we got the official rules for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition in late 2015, when we started to, get the books being sold and such after all the D&D Next play test had happened. And it is broken down into seasons. So much like a television show has seasons and certain themes and such, Adventures Leagues does as well.
And they usually revolve around all of the different hardcover in-a-box adventures that come out from Wizards of the Coast. For example, season 1 was the Tyranny of Dragons, Horde of the Dragon Queen, and Rise of Tiamat book set, and a whole bunch of what are called Ddal Adventures that were written to go along with it.
Yeah, they're kind of like the DLC for Dungeons and Dragons, is what they've sometimes been called. And so, alongside those hardcover adventures, are a whole set of adventures that kind of take place at the same time period in the same setting, but tell a different story. Now, it's one that is kind of happening, like I said, at the same time as the hardcover, but it is its own story. It might interact a little bit with, some of the plot elements from those hardcovers, or some of the plot elements of those hardcovers might come into play over the course of the season, so to speak, of those adventures.
Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves going into different adventure types, what is organized play, Jeremy?
Well, organized play is something that allows, a community of players to play together in a portable way. So, if you want to play Dungeons and Dragons in a more standardized or organized format, where you can pick up and play whenever you want, wherever it is offered, then Adventures League is going to be a great fit.
Yep. Any online, especially now since the COVID-19 pandemic hit, you can pretty much, if you look hard enough, find a D&D Adventures League game of any tier at any time of the day, any day of the week, over in various places.
Well, you mentioned something there. Key word, Angelo, tier.
Uh, Tier.
Well, there's tiers of play to organized play. Maybe you can tell us about that.
Okay, so there are 4 tiers in organized play. There's what is called Tier 1, which is where a lot of the new players will be, pretty much all of them. It is for levels 1 to 4 adventurers. And the reason why I say that all the new players is because in D&D Adventures League, everybody starts at level 1.
Yeah, there are a lot of rules in Dungeons Dragons Adventures League, but they fit generally into a 4 to 5 page document. They talk about,
A lot of different things, but before we even, I was just going to preface that all by saying the rules themselves, as a player, you only need to know a handful. It's basically just, you assessing. Absolutely, we will be suggesting a lot of different links at some point in this.
for
Don't
sure.
worry about that. But the thing with Adventures League is that as a player, you don't need to know all of the rules. You only need to know basically the how your character works, and the DM was probably going to be able to at least guide you through everything else. The main thing that you need to do is that what separates Adventurers League from non-Adventurers League games is logging what you've played at the end of every session. If you do
Yeah.
that, you're fine.
And there are some basic character creation rules as well. And I think one of the biggest that might be different from a home game or a non-organized play game is how you determine your ability scores or your statistics or stats, as people call them. So your strength, your constitution, your dexterity, your intelligence, your wisdom, and your charisma. So you don't roll those using dice. You use the player's handbook and the rules presented there at the beginning of the book. It presents 2 other options. One is point buy, and the other is standard array. That way, you're not detrimented by low stats or anything like that.
And then you don't have 4 stats that are 18 and a dungeon master questioning how you rolled those at home. But before we get too far ahead of, and because as you're going to notice, Jeremy and I do tend to go off on tangents quite a bit when we do these things. Back to the tiers of play. Basically, there are 20 levels in Dungeons and Dragons for 5th edition characters, and the tiers break up the different groups into levels that can play with each other. So levels 1 to 4 is tier 1, levels 5 to 10 is tier 2, levels 11 to 16 is tier 3, and levels 17 to 20 is tier 4. And so that's to make sure that you don't have a bunch of level 2s running around with a bunch of level 20s, because that wouldn't be fun for either group, really.
No, no, for sure. And as Angelo mentioned, it is important to, when joining an organized play campaign like this, that you start at level 1. If you show up to some, organized events, where there are people that are very familiar with the rules and onboarding new players, which many of the communities are, they can present you with pre-generated characters in either tier 1 or tier 2 to basically get you started. But when you really want to, make your own character, you'll do so in tier 1.
Yes. So some of the extra rules that we talk about when we're talking about Adventures League is that because the majority of the rules for Adventures League are the rules as written or raw for the 5th edition game of Dungeons and Dragons. But there are some additional little tweaks here and there that the Adventure League administrators put in order to keep things on par, keep everybody on the same page, so on and so forth. And
yeah, the more that you're familiar with the rules as they are written in the book, the better. If you've played with groups that have a lot of house rules or are bringing in rules from other games or older editions of Dungeons and Dragons, then it could get confusing. But if you're familiar with what's in the player's handbook, then that's really the only book you need to play Adventures League. And if you don't want to, you can, of course, reference the free rules from Dungeons and Dragons, which are available on their website. And of course, we got a website we'll share with you that has all those links as well.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about just a very small little bit about of how because if we were to just sit and read through the Adventure League rules, that would be very, very dry because
Correct.
there'd be very little actual reason because people could generally read on their own.
But if you
So
wanted to find a game of Adventures League, Angelo, where would you look?
so online, there's a whole bunch of different um, either Discord servers or various pages on sites like Warhorn or tabletop events or even Meetup that offer Adventure League games. And the cool thing about why you would play Adventures League in the first place with all these additional extra rules and that sort of thing is because I could play tonight with a group of people from Australia, and then I could play tomorrow night with a group of people in England, all with the same character, so long as I'm following the Adventures League rules and they're following the Adventures League rules. It's completely plug and play and portable.
Mm-hmm. And it really does lend itself to community. When people are looking for something that is a little bit more standardized, they know that they're on a level and fair playing field. Because when you're playing with strangers, if these rules weren't in place, people could be, bringing a first level character or a fifth level character to a table with higher level people or into a game with a lot of house rules that you're not familiar with. So
Yep.
this really does lend itself to, hey, I'm looking for an AL game, so am I, and you can find a community that's hosting that sort of thing.
So currently right now the main way that you're going to play probably D&D in general, but for the most part Adventures League is going to be online.
Due to the COVID restrictions.
Yes. Once things open up, generally your local game store may have Adventures League, may not, but that's going to be dependent on the area you live in. And
Yes. But
but
in person or online in the GTA, the group that we work with is called Unite the Factions.
that is our group that we run. Currently, I think we've got a Discord server that's got about 750 people on it. We run games. We have our Monday night Ddals, which is basically our weekly game session that we have a bunch of DMs who run public games with the Adventures League style of whatever tier the DMs wish that week. We try to keep a couple of low-level games in there, so if new players wanted to play, they could jump in easily. As well as we do one big event every month, which is another really big reason why Adventures League is cool. Jeremy, what's an epic?
Okay, well, an epic just isn't a name for something that is epic and epically cool. But in Adventures League, it is a multi-table interactive adventure. Generally speaking, you want at least 6 tables that are playing the same adventure. This can be done across multiple tiers, and there are various interactive elements, roaming monsters, and both NPC allies as well as foes. And there's an administration team that oversees all of it to, kind of bring it all together. And these can be done online or in person. 6 tables minimum, but we have done up to 20 or more at a time. And I believe the record right now is about 100 tables at a time that has been done at certain big online events hosted by Wizards of the Coast, the publisher of D&D.
Yep, D&D Celebration. We had only 66 tables running at a time, but we had those running every 3 hours, so that was a lot of players
For sure. What
So,
do you like about epics, Angelo?
what do I like about epics? Personally, there's like as an administrator, I like jumping up on a chair in the middle of a convention and yelling across to about 100 different people, different battle updates and instructions and what people can do. It's really an adrenaline rush that you don't get uh, very often when you're playing D&D.
Definitely. So, an example of what might happen during an epic is there is a castle that, and some villain has taken over or is looking to attack, and you might be trying to, attack that fortress, or you might be trying to defend that fortress, for example. And so the different tables are taking on many different things, at the same time, uh, and they're getting to choose their own adventure, so to speak, and the sorts of things that they want to do to support this larger effort that's happening. And we are now in season 10 of Adventures League, even though it's only been about 6 years of D&D 5th edition. And there are many of these different epics that are out there, and all of them have their own different flavor, mechanics, extra rules, and more. So they're a really dynamic experience.
So we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves again. So Jeremy, what exactly do you need to do in order to sit down and play your very first Adventures League game?
Well, I guess the basics are that you need to find somebody, and that's again what the community allows for. So if you go, for example, to unitethefactions.com, which is our website, or if you do a search for Adventures League games, either in Roll20 or just Google, you'll be able to find some games that are running. Once you find a game that's running, if you're brand new to Adventures League, you'll probably want to look for something that's in Tier 1 or beginner friendly or labeled something like that. Um, Perhaps those people would have pre-generated characters for you if you're not comfortable making your own. But of course, you can go to the Dungeons and Dragons website or even the resources section on unitethefactions.com and find pre-generated character sheets. And if you're brand new to D&D, don't worry. That's what a dungeon master is there to facilitate. And the D&D community of Adventures League, loves welcoming new players in, regardless of their experience level in playing RPGs or not.
Exactly. New players make the hobby grow, the community grow, the overall scheme Adventures League grow. To that question right there, to be honest, you can just use the standard reference guide online, and you could make a character to play Adventures League with just the basic rule set. Anything else that you have on top of that will let you to go more into detail and have more in-depth characters. But in terms of what you need, you can just use the standard rules.
Yeah, the basic rules that come either with the D&D starter kit, they're available for free online, and they are also in the D&D Essentials kit are great. But if you're looking for what is the first book I should buy, once I like the hobby and I want to pursue it more, it's always going to be the Player's Handbook.
It's always going to be the Player's Handbook,
hands down. And we're going to suggest that you go to your local game store and support them by buying your book there. It's pretty much the same price as Amazon or Chapters these days here in Canada. So might as well, support small business and the hobby, because, you're going to be potentially, supporting them and the types of supplies that they'll be providing to players and dungeon masters.
because when this is all over, we're going to want a place to play again.
For sure. And it's those same places that, either have hosted Adventures League, or if they start to see people that are interested, might be looking for dungeon masters and or players.
So, Lewis, to answer your question, do characters have to be online on a site like Roll20 or D&D Beyond? If you are playing online, odds are your dungeon master is going to be using a virtual tabletop like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or Foundry. or soon to be the D&D Beyond one that they're coming out with eventually, but who knows when that'll drop. And having your character on roll log sheets, it's coming up. And once you have your character on one of those platforms, then it might be a little bit easier. But in general, a lot of DMs online, not in our group tends to use a lot of Roll20, but most of the other groups online that I've seen, they do just D&D on Zoom and just have their paper character sheets in front of them and roll dice on the table.
Yep. But if you're new, I would suggest using D&D Beyond. It has some, simple access to the basic rules, and you can make a character there, in a few minutes. I mean, if you're brand new, maybe 15 minutes, but it does kind of walk you through step by step, and it does have, some limited options, but still options you could use until you're willing to, maybe take a look at a blank character sheet and build one that way.
So because the question, the just one word statement log sheets is on there. So at the end of an adventure session for a D&D Adventures League, you finish your first session. What do you need to do, Jeremy, immediately after that in order to make sure your character continues to be what we like to call Adventures League legal?
Right. Yeah. So you want to log what you're doing in Adventures League. So who is your dungeon master? What adventure did you play? And there is a standardized log sheet that you can get from the Adventures League site, which is a sub-site of Dungeons and Dragons' website. Again, if you go to unitethefactions.com, under resources, you can find links to all of these things. But yeah, there is a PDF that you can download that you can record things on, and your dungeon master is there to help you fill that out. And that way, once you build your character through a series of sessions, you'll have a history of what they've done, what treasure they've accumulated, and more. And the Dungeons and Dragons Adventures League Player's Guide, for whatever season that you're playing in, is there to give you instructions on how to record those things and how you can accumulate treasure and such, as well as trade it. But we are getting just a little bit ahead. There's also an unauthorized website that Angelo actually just shared.
I was just about to get into that because that the other way that if you don't want to use a paper log sheet, a third-party website called adventureleaguelog.com is incredible for keeping all of your log sheets in one easy-to-track place that you can update right from your cell phone at the table at your game store.
Yeah, that old site link that you posted there, Angelo.
Is that not the right one? That is not the right one. Oops.
That is a very old one. I posted the new
very old one.
But yeah, Adventures League is extremely useful. It allows you to keep your logs online. It allows you to export them. It allows you to switch in between Dungeon Master logs and character logs. It's just a great tool if you'd prefer to do it online, or just take it down on paper, or your phone, or on your computer somewhere, and then update it on there later. Okay, so beyond the rules, and I guess looking where you can play. If you were to look for games in person, Angelo, where would you be looking for games once we get back to normal?
So looking for games, generally the easiest place and the most accessible places to play are going to be found on Meetup, and are usually going to be through your local game store or a very small local Adventure League group, or sometimes even a larger Adventures League group, depending on your area, such as Unite the Factions.
Right.
If you are in the Greater Toronto area in Southern Ontario, Canada.
Yeah, so we host small events at small local gaming stores, some larger stores where we've hosted, up to 14 tables at a time. But then again, since we're here with fan meetups, we've also hosted events at Toronto Comic Con. Last time that it was there in 2019 over the March break, and we also put on 24 tables all 4 days of Fan Expo 2019. We had actually 3 different rooms running RPGs.
And we had about, I think it was 42 dungeon masters running like every 2 hours, pretty much.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's not even all the staff. That's just how many people we had running at a time, really. In
To answer
between.
to answer your question, Chris, check with the store. If they have, check with the store. If they're running games there, they might have that on their website. They might have that on meetups,
Or
or they
even
just might
Facebook.
have it. Yeah, on Facebook, they would even have it just posted in their store, Dungeons and Dragons night. But that's going to be on a store by store basis.
Yeah, and of course, it's going to be limited in the near future. But
Yeah.
at least, yeah, at least for now. We're certainly hopeful that Fan Expo will kick off this year and we'll be able to run those events. We were running an epic pretty much every single day except for the Sunday because the
Yep.
convention closes early. And we ran after hours. So after the convention closed, we were running our big epic events for 4 hours afterwards.
Yep. We had the adventure hall running for so con's closed, everybody's filing out. They're still watching us roll dice in that one hall.
Yeah, and we had some people even come back to us and say that playing an epic for the first time not only was an amazing Dungeons and Dragons experience, but it was the most fun that some of those people had at Fan Expo.
So the cool thing that we keep wanting to be driving home is the reason why you would want to play Adventures League in the first place is that you can play at all these different events we're talking about with the exact same character. Because Adventures League is more about the individual character going through their own story by playing a bunch of different adventures, as opposed to a small group going through an entire adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that that's impossible, it's just that the overall design of Adventures League is more centric on the individual character.
Yeah, and it's one of the advantages of Adventures League. One of the draws. If you love Dungeons and Dragons or want to try it out for the first time, and you are having some difficulty finding a group, Adventures League is a great way to find people to play with. Or a lot of Dungeons and Dragons groups meet every week and they play together, but that might not work for your schedule. Maybe you're only able to play once or twice a month, or even more sporadic than that. So again, Adventures League allows you to have that portability and an outlet to play in.
Because you can miss 3 different weeks. You come back to the store a month later, drop that same character sheet on the table, and play the next adventure that they have lined up.
Yeah, and there's thousands of adventures to choose from at this point in Adventures League.
So much content, not enough hours to play it all.
Yeah, and some people, it becomes a hobby within a hobby. More than just loving Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of people love Adventures League. There are a lot of big conventions, just like Fan Expo in the United States, that host content like this as well. There's Gen Con, which is the premier American board game convention that happens every August, that features Adventures League alongside many different other versions of D&D.
And I ran and played games at the last one that was allowed to happen in person. Yeah. It was a very fun experience.
My favorite Dungeons and Dragons convention in the States is Gamehole Con, which happens in and around Halloween, usually before or after, sometimes during. It's a smaller convention, but it's very much Adventures League and Dungeons and Dragons focused. Hopefully that'll be something that goes off this year. But what we're getting at is that, if this is something that you like, and you like that style of convention scene, it's something that you could certainly pursue.
There are big ones pretty much every month, all across. I would even hazard to say the world. I mean, there's
Yeah.
especially the online playing online has opened up a lot of different possibilities. Um, I think there was Maydays, which was an Australian con that was back last May. Then there was Gen Con. There was
Yep.
AlbaCon that was in the UK. There's ones all across the US. There's the ones that we put on here in Canada, the and an event. If you're playing Adventures League, you can play with all these people with the exact same character or characters that you have. You're allowed to have as many characters as you want in Adventures League. You just can't, which is especially handy because you can't play the same adventure more than once with the same character. So that's another solid rule to keep in track of. And essentially, and we keep saying this, but the draw is that you can pretty much play D&D wherever you want, whenever you want, so long as you're all following the same Adventures League rule set
Well,
all over the world.
can you play Adventures League at home?
You absolutely can play in your own house as well. In fact, that's pretty much what we're all doing these days now anyway, because we're all playing online due to restrictions on various online conventions and websites.
Yeah, and when it comes to playing Adventures League at home, you could play Adventures League rules at home with, a group of people in your home game, so to speak. Or you could play Adventures League content without following the rules if it's just something that you like. In that case, your character is then not Adventures League legal. If you choose to, maybe take some elements of it and build it into your own story. But it's Dungeons and Dragons, right? So, it ceases to be organized play, but, there's a lot of different things that you can do with it.
I do know a handful of people that do take Adventures League content and then wrap it up into their own home games that they don't play Adventures League style, because there's just so much content available that it's a resource that can be used quite easily to adapt to any game of Dungeons and Dragons that you play.
Yeah, like we said, it's essentially the DLC of D&D. There's just so much of it. It's awesome. So as we mentioned earlier, and kind of on the topic of content, again, Dungeons and Dragons Adventures League is sorted into seasons, and we are at 10 seasons right now, and there is non-seasonal content as well, or sometimes referred to as season 0. And each of these seasons have their own rules, and the rules have changed over time. Whether they are thematic changes to fit the theme of that season, or if they're improvements that the community is testing or refining over time. There will be, different rules in effect.
And again, I'm going to say that I'm going to probably repeat this a couple more times before we're done. You do not need to know all of the rules in order to play. You only just basically have to have a character sheet in front of you that follows the player's guidelines, and you're good to go. The dungeon master most likely be able to take care of the rest. Let them be the ones that know all of the rules and just go have fun.
Yes. Yeah, it's really just knowing what your character creation rules are. And as I mentioned, the rules change every year, sometimes multiple times a year. And sometimes in quick fire succession as they, take feedback from the community and, further refine it. So you might get version 1, version 1.1, version 1.2, in a pretty short time frame as they're just, filling any gaps where there were questions or, clarifying things where there was any confusion. One of the older rules of Adventures League that has been changing within the past week to a lot of discussion and fanfare is what used to be called the PHB +1 rule, or the Player's Handbook +1 rule, in that when you were creating your character, you can use 2 books, the player's handbook plus one more. So if you were looking to use another, oh, go ahead, Angela.
No, I was gonna say, so yeah, so there's all the different books like Volo's Guide to Monsters, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, the new one, Tasha's Cauldron, that are would be considered +1 books. You would only be able to use the player's handbook and one of those. So if you wanted to play a Fire Genasi War Wizard, that wouldn't work in Adventures League because that would require 2 separate texts. But now, as Jeremy was saying, please continue.
Yeah, it's a rule that has been dropped. There has been a lot of play testing that has been required, which is why we've been waiting some time to see these rules get updated. But again, it's one of the advantages of the community. While we're trying to create a level and fair playing field, things change over time. Similar things that changed, that was a big positive for everybody, especially those who hate math, was counting experience points. In the earlier days of Adventures League, you had to count experience points as a dungeon master, and at the end of the adventure, divide it all up against each player, and of course, use the table that's in the player's handbook or the basic rules to do your leveling. But it's been simplified, right, Angela?
Yep. Now, at the end of every single Adventures League game that you have completed successfully, you can choose whether or not to take a milestone level up.
It's that easy.
It's that easy.
Play 19 adventures and get to level 20. That's it.
Yeah, level 20 is in a box, right? And it's got its own little couple other restrictions. Like before, when I first started playing Adventures League 3 years ago, there was no cap on magic items, and you'd show up to a table with your character who's been playing for about 6 or 7 sessions and are like level 4 or 5, and you sit down and you're playing with a guy who's got 32 magic items at level 11.
How's that possible?
Now, with the item caps, it's a more even playing field. In tier 1, which I described earlier, levels 1 to 4, you're allowed to have exactly 1 magic item that is of uncommon rarity or higher.
But again, just to reiterate, you don't need to know the rules.
No.
You'll learn them more as you go, and the Dungeon Master is there to facilitate the rules all the time.
Just got to know how your character sheet works.
Yeah.
And so they can even help you with that.
Yeah, and playing an Adventures League adventure, one cool thing about it is that each adventure you play is kind of a one-shot. I mean, it really is. You could jump into a completely different adventure that has nothing to do with the one that you played prior, just to try, these different one-shots, so to speak. So it is tightly knit, such that when you sit down to play and when you're done playing, you have finished the adventure most likely, unless you wanted to spend a lot more time on that adventure and had kind of pre-planned that you were going to take more than one session to complete it. But generally it's a 4-hour session or less.
There are a lot of different time slots that the adventures could run. There are 1-hour modules that are generally a little bit more intro focused. Those are the ones that we were actually running when we put on Toronto Comic Con in 2019. Because last year was 2020.
Yeah,
it's a blur. When we were at Comic Con in 2019, we were running 1-hour intro adventures. People could show up. We would hand them a character sheet, help them make a character, or give them a pre-gen that one of us had made, and they'd sit down, play a 1-hour adventure, hand them a log sheet, and say, if you want to keep playing Adventures League, you can find us in these places or find other groups in various places like we said earlier. And people got to play with us in Adventures League and get to learn how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And some of these 1-hour adventures are actually like super fun for veterans and beginners alike.
Dinosaur races.
Yeah, I do love the dinosaur.
I know that's your favorite one
from season 7. Yeah, in terms of 1-hour adventures, for sure.
Yeah. And then my favorite slot to run is actually the 2-hour adventures. I find that that's a very good amount of content that you can play and run as a dungeon master without going into too much brain burn, as some people like to call it. But that doesn't happen to some people, right, Jeremy?
No, no, there's some people that just, as dungeon masters, go for 4 days straight, sleeping in between dungeon mastering, and that is all.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it to everybody.
No, I did it once and thought I was going to collapse, but Jeremy does it at every con, and I don't know how he does it, but that's neither here nor there. So there's also 4-hour adventures, there's 6-hour adventures, and there's even a couple of 8-hour adventures that are set to play all at once.
Yeah, but generally speaking, in tier 1, where you're getting started, an adventure will be 1, 2, or 4 hours of play. I haven't seen a 3-hour adventure yet.
Eberron.
Okay. It actually says 3 hours?
I think so.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's talk about seasonal campaigns. This is something new that started last year.
In September, that we were introduced with a new concept for Adventures League, where when a new book gets released, such as Rime of the Frost Maiden, which is the first seasonal content adventure, they're going to have it so that if you want to play the season current adventures, you have to make a new character for that season, because older characters will not be allowed to gain any milestones, gold, magic items, any of that stuff when playing seasonal content. This is done to make it so that, like we were saying before, I can't show up with a character that's got really good magic items and play with the new stuff. They want you to play it kind of as is and as it was intended, which is, I think, very good.
Yeah, it creates a better experience for the dungeon master and the player, and focuses on the story more than breaking it with some magic item that you bring to the table, like a cube of force
or staff of power.
Yeah.
But yes, so that is the new seasonal rules for Adventures League, and I'm sure that when the newest book comes out, Candlekeep, it's actually going into a different rule set. So Jeremy, which rule set is Candlekeep going to be under when it comes out next month?
Okay, so as Angela mentioned, the seasonal rules or season 10 rules are for Rime of the Frost Maiden. But the newest book that will be published by Wizards of the Coast next month, Candlekeep Mysteries, is going to be part of a new campaign outside of the seasonal campaign called the Masters Campaign. And there's all sorts of content that is being added to it, including one of your favorites, Angelo.
So there's for anybody who's part of this call that's a longtime Dungeons and Dragons fan that's may or may not have played in previous editions and whatnot, there's a organization known as the Red Wizards of Fey. And the Masters campaign started with a series of adventures called Dreams of the Red Wizards, where your characters go and have to try to deal with Red Wizards over the course of several different adventures.
Yeah, the Red Wizards are not the good guys.
They're not the good guys.
Not in this storyline. And so, yeah, that makes up another part of the Masters campaign, whose rules actually came out this week as well.
Brand new for even us.
Yeah, so this is timely that we even were putting on this fireside chat with fan meetups, because the rules are changing, and for people that are new to Adventures League, it's probably the best time to join ever, because the rules have been relaxed so much, and they're pretty easy to follow.
It's quite a good time for Adventures League, because, like Jeremy said, the playing field's never been more level, as a lot of older characters who have a billion magic items aren't allowed to play the content anymore.
Yeah, and with the pandemic, Dungeons and Dragons has tried to facilitate people finding Adventures League games directly through them and their Yawning Portal website, named after the Yawning Portal of Waterdeep, the very famous tavern.
Mm-hmm.
And it is hosted by Baldman Games, who is an organizer of Adventures League events. And they also have their own series of adventures in the Moonshae Isles in the Forgotten Realms of Dungeons and Dragons, which is actually, I don't think we've actually said where any of these adventures happen yet.
That's true.
And so, yeah, Adventures Leagues takes place in the Forgotten Realms. And Moonshae Isles are just to the west of the Sword Coast of Faerun, if you're familiar with the Forgotten Realms. And so Baldman Games has a whole kind of continent or island area where they write a lot of adventures, and those are also being added to the Masters campaign. And they will be adding more next year as they create a new season in the Moonshaes. And as I mentioned, Gamehole Con, one of my favorite conventions in the United States for Dungeons and Dragons, has their own little area called the Border Kingdoms, which is to the southeast of the Sword Coast, and they have a whole series of adventures that are also being added to this Masters campaign. So there's just a lot of things going on in this, kind of seasonal, non-seasonal area of Adventures League.
Yes, and because of so now the way Adventures League works is there are 3 campaigns that are set in the Forgotten Realms, and a 4th that is set in Eberron.
What's Eberron?
Eberron is another, basically, planet, and that is in the Prime Material Plane.
All right, and it's kind of steampunkish, right?
It's kind of steampunky. Yeah, it's a little. I like it. I like it quite a bit. But
so we now basically have 4 campaigns of Adventures League. We have seasonal, Masters,
and then the one we haven't talked about yet,
Eberron, and the last one,
which is Historic. So Historic takes all of the adventures from seasons 1 through 9, plus all of the community-created content, which we haven't even discussed yet, and lumps them all into one big ball of adventures that are able to be played by characters in Historic. So all of the old characters, or the ones that haven't been migrated to the Masters campaign, are free to reign and play all of that old content as many times as their characters that they have available can play, which is once per character.
Yeah. So if you're looking for something simple to start, you'd probably want to start with season 10 or the current seasonal campaign, or something historic. If you are traditionally a fan of Eberron, then naturally you're going to gravitate towards the Eberron campaign. And, there might be some other, campaigns that come up over time. We know that in the past week, a new Dungeons and Dragons book has been announced for May, which expands from Barovia into the rest of Ravenloft and the Dread Realms within the Shadowfell. So we know that something's coming for that eventually. So there's no shortage of things to play for whatever genre you're looking for, whether it's fantasy, high adventure, the high magic technology of Eberron, or the horror that is available from what will soon be some Ravenloft adventures, or even all of those things that take place in the historic campaign.
So we've done a lot of talking about all the various things at Adventures League. Now we're going to tell you about where to find all of this stuff.
Yes. So apart from the links that are on our resources page on unitethefactions.com, if you're looking for adventures to run, you can find them on dmsguild.com. So if you're a dungeon master or want to become a dungeon master, you can find adventures there.
Conveniently, that's also the exact same place where you can find the Adventures League Player's Guide, that will have which will have a few pages of what you will need to start an Adventures League character.
Yeah, and so when you're perusing through adventures, there are some different adventure types that we can go over briefly. So there are the DDAL adventures, which is a code that they use for all of the seasonal adventures.
Yep. So season 1 would be DDAL01 - whatever number in the series. Season 10, DDAL 10 - whatever number in the series. So on and so forth. And
then DDEP means that it's an epic. So while some of the newer epics have rules for playing as a single table. It's definitely something that is best played at an event that is organized with, I'd say, minimum of 6 to 10 tables.
There's the DDCAs, which is
competitive.
Just different way to play D&D. Everyone's in the same room, and you're all playing the same adventure with pre-generated characters, and that's when you actually keep score in Dungeons and Dragons, and for all the bragging rights.
Yeah, and I gotta say, my favorite adventure in Dungeons and Dragons of all time.
Jeremy and I have the exact same one. It's called Gangs of Waterdeep. You have 5 rogues and a bard, and every table's playing the exact same group of characters.
Yeah,
and you're all trying to pull off the best heist.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazingly written.
It's the only time that I've DM'd for 8 hours and not felt like a dead man.
Correct. Yeah, I could do that almost any day of the week. Other things you can find on DM's Guild is where we get from hundreds of adventures to thousands is the community created content program that's part of the historic campaign.
It's written by guys like Jeremy and I. I actually have one that's on DM's Guild that can be bought and read and played by whoever.
Yeah, these were written for conventions, so to kind of better support the community and playing Dungeons and Dragons at conventions, this program was put in place to allow people to write adventures to then host as unique adventures at their conventions.
Like the one that I put out there was for Mississauga Comic Expo.
Yeah, and that has now been replaced by a new program called Dungeon Craft, and each of these programs kind of have their own setting rules, as well as the sorts of things that you can write about, just so that you're not taking people potentially out of the Forgotten Realms and somewhere else on some wild goose chase and such.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we do a little bit more on where to find some of these resources? So DM's Guild is the big one. It's going to have any adventures that have the Adventures League tag. It's going to have the Adventures League Players Pack, the Adventures League DM's Guide.
Yep, and here's the official Dungeons and Dragons website and their page for Adventures League. Yep. I've put the link here. It's dnd.wizards.com/ddal_general. It has some of what we talked about in terms of the seasonal rules, masters rules, and the Oracle of War campaign, which is the formal name for the Eberron campaign that is currently in play. And yeah, there's so much that you can do from there, including at the bottom of that page is a link that I will post here as well. It is what we spoke about earlier, the Yawning Portal, which is where they post blog posts for the latest updates and such. But again, we encourage you to search Google for a community near you, whether it's in person or online. Of course, online you can be playing with anyone that fits the time zone you want to play in. I know for some people that work nights, they might be playing D&D with people on the other side of the world.
Because it fits the time schedule.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to circle back all the way to what we've said a couple times now. As soon as the biggest thing with Adventures League is just finding a group and sitting down and playing, because that character can be brought and played anywhere, so long as you have created it with the Adventure League rule set, which we've posted the links. No, actually, we haven't. Let me get that one in there, actually. Now that I say that out loud. A link to the Adventure League player pack.
Yeah, well, all those links are actually on that first one that I shared, the dnd.wizards Ddal.
That is true. It is in there.
That's where they've posted the most recent rules for Season 10 and the Masters campaign, because I don't believe those are on DM's Guild.
Those are not on DM's Guild yet. So again, you don't have to know all the rules. No, anyone who says you have to know all the rules, I mean, I'm pretty good with them, and I don't know every single rule.
Nor do I.
And
Don't
but
pretend to.
yeah, I mean, I like to pretend to, but no, I don't know every single rule. The once you have your character sheet, you find a table, you log it on Adventures League log, and now you can play that Adventures League character anywhere where Adventures League is being played.
Yeah, and gotta tell you, just so many cool adventures that you can either, run yourself as a dungeon master and have a lot of fun with, or if you're a player, there's just so many great adventures out there that you can play alongside. Again, as all these kind of cool mini one-shots that can be tied together or not based on how you chart your own path across all of these play opportunities.
So we have a few minutes left in our scheduled 1 hour. Is there any questions that anybody who's listening currently has? Just put it in the chat and I'll do my best to answer, and so will Jeremy.
Yeah.
If we don't have any questions, that might be it.
Yeah. Again, if you're looking for opportunities to play, hit up unitethefactions.com. You can join our Discord server. We run games all the time, whether it's our Monday night AL games. There's a lot of ad hoc games. People find their groups playing AL sometimes this way.
That's actually something that we didn't actually touch. Another thing that's Adventures League is great for is finding. You play with so many different people. Eventually, you're going to find a group of people that you really like to play with, and they can become a regular group that you play with all the time. That's how I found basically all of my regular groups that I play with was through Adventures League.
Yeah. And our next event is for higher tier players, but
The one after that.
the ones after that in April and May, we're going to focus on the Eberron campaign. So, if
Starting
you're looking
at level 1.
Yeah, starting at level 1 for pretty much everybody. So, if kind of a world where magic is used as technology is in a fantasy setting is something that interests you, and spells can literally come alive. And there are, magic trains and such, flying skiffs, hoverboards,
floating cities.
Yeah.
And not like the Netherese ones that Jeremy likes.
No. I think more of the Fifth Element when I think of how tall some of the cities are in Eberron. But yeah, lots of cool stuff coming up. Pay attention to the fan meetups. Hit us up on our Discord server via unitethefactions.com. And, feel free to reach out to us. Adventures League has a lot to offer, both in play opportunities and making new friends.
Jeremy and I are both very active on our Discord server. We love to answer questions, and so does it is in our website, unitethefactions.com. There should be a link to the Discord server there.
Oh yeah, it's on the front page.
I will put it on as the most recent link at the very bottom so that people can see it again. If you want to join our Discord server, hop in, and just, hey, if you want to DM for us on Monday nights, I will never say no to more DMs on Monday nights.
Totally.
And thank you for watching, and I hope this was in some way educational for you.
All right, thanks everyone. See you later.
Thank you very much, guys. That was great. Bye.